One of the most bizarre trends of the early to mid-60s were the so-called death discs, also known as splatter platters. The songs usually dealt with topics such as fatal car crashes and suicide, and they often ended with pleas of everlasting love. Many of these songs were even banned by radio stations, which only helped increase their appeal to teenagers. Morbid pop songs started hitting the airwaves in 1959. Songs like Tell Laura I Love Her by Ray Peterson and Teen Angel by Mark Dinning are considered to be early examples of this trend. But during the early to mid-60s, so many teen tragedy songs were penned that these death discs almost seemed to become part of a cultural phenomenon. Let's take a look at some of the best morbid pop songs of the 60s.
That's why I fell for the leader of the pack.
Leader of the Pack is probably the most well-known death disc of the 60s. The song was written by producer George Morton, and released in September 1964. Leader of the Pack features all the elements that define this unusual trend. It was a tale of young love, parental disapproval, and death by motorcycle. The leader of the pack, whose name was Jimmy, was the leader of a motorcycle gang. Jimmy was the archetypical bad boy that you wouldn't want your daughter to date. The song's protagonist, Betty, is forced to break up with him due to his parents' disapproval. And as soon as she informs him that their relationship is over, a completely crushed Jimmy speeds off his motorcycle and crashes on a rain-slicked surface.
Look out!
The song hit number 1 on the Billboard chart on November 28, 1964. The single was refused airplay by the BBC, but that didn't stop it from charting in Britain. In fact, it charted 3 times on the singles chart. It was number 11 in 1965, number 3 in 1972, and once again at number 7 in 1976. The record also reached number 1 in Australia.
I hear the voice of my darling, the girl I love and lost a year ago.
Another morbid pop highlight is Johnny Remember Me, by John Leyton. The tune was released in 1961, and produced by genius British producer Joe Meek. This is without a doubt one of the most haunting songs of the 60s, with its eerie echoing sound, and the ghostly foreboding female backing vocal. John Leyton was backed by a band called The Outlaws, which featured future Deep Purple guitarist Ritchie Blackmore. The song was banned by the BBC, but it rapidly rose to the number 1 spot. Several years later, journalist Tom Ewing described the song as the weirdest and most gripping British record to ever reach number 1.
We had a quarrel, I was untrue on the night he died.
Twinkle Ripley wrote and recorded her first single, Terry, when she was only 16 years old. The song featured Jimmy Page and Big Jim Sullivan on guitar, and Bobby Graham on drums, 3 of the best session men in Britain at the time. Terry very much followed the leader of the pack formula.
He rode into the night, accelerated his motorbike.
Once again, it was a song about a young man who gets killed in a motorcycle accident. However, Twinkle took it one step further, as one of the lines indicated the intention of suicide.
Please wait at the gate of heaven for me, Terry.
This was one of the main reasons why the BBC decided to ban the record. Twinkle was also forbidden to perform the song on Ready Steady Go, one of the most popular television shows from that era. Despite this, or because of it, the single reached number 4 in the UK singles chart in December 1964, spending 15 weeks in the charts. This was Twinkle's only major hit. Her following single, Golden Lights, which was covered by the Smiths in the 80s, stalled at number 21.
She's gone to heaven, so I got to be good, so I can see my baby when I leave this world.
Wayne Cochran wrote and released Last Kiss in 1961. The song didn't do well on the charts when it was originally released, but it became a major hit 3 years later when J. Frank Wilson and the Cavaliers covered it and took it to number 2 on the Billboard charts. The song's story was based on a real car crash. Last Kiss tells the story of a young man who was able to find his sweetheart after their car crashed, despite the rain and the blood running in his eyes.
Raised her head, then she smiled, said, hold me darling for a little while. I held her close, I kissed her our last kiss. I found the love that I knew I would miss.
The song has been covered by many bands and artists over the years, including Pearl Jam and Wednesday, among others.
At Dead Man's Grave.
Surf, cars and girls were three topics that dominated the lyrics of surf bands in the early 60s. So it seemed inevitable that a surf band would eventually end up writing a death disc involving a fatal car crash. Dead Man's Curve was written by Brian Wilson, Artie Kornfeld, Roger Christian, and Jan Berry, at Wilson's mother's house in Santa Monica. It tells the tale of a street race gone awry. The protagonist is severely injured and his racing opponent is killed. Coincidentally, Jan Berry of Jan and Dean would himself later be involved in a near-fatal incident in 1966, when he crashed his own Stingray into a parked truck on North Whittier Drive, near Dead Man's Curve. Sadly, the car crash left him brain damaged and severely handicapped for the rest of his life.
With his dying breath, they heard him say, "Tell Laura I love her."
One of the earliest examples of this death disc trend was Tell Laura I Love Her by Ray Peterson, released in 1960. However, the plot of the song was a little more advanced than most. It tells the story of a young man called Tommy, who wants to buy his girlfriend a diamond ring. So Tommy decides to win the money in a stock car race, with fatal results.
In the chapel where Laura prayed for her Tommy who passed away.
In the final verse, Laura prays inside the chapel, where she can still hear Tommy's voice intoning the title. The song reached number 7 on the Billboard chart, and it was a hit in 14 countries.
Tell Laura I love her. Tell Laura I need her.
In Britain, the song was covered by Ricky Valance. It reached number 1 on the singles chart, and it sold over 1 million copies in 1960.
Ebony skies had taken my life's most wonderful prize.
The Everly Brothers were one of the most successful American acts from the late 50s and early 60s. And they too ended up recording a death disc. Ebony Eyes was written by John D. Loudermilk, and it was released in 1961. The lyrics tell the tragic story of a young man who loses his beloved fiancée in an airplane crash. The plane crashes because of dark, stormy weather conditions, and these conditions remind him of his girlfriend's ebony eyes. The single was released together with Walk Right Back, which reached number 8 on the Billboard charts. In Britain, it was released as a double A-side. Once again, it was banned by the BBC, but that didn't stop the single from reaching number 1 and remaining there for 3 weeks. It became the 9th best-selling single of 1961 in the UK.
But a girl from that place will just bring me disgrace.
Patches by Dickie Lee was yet another death disc that resembled the story of Romeo and Juliet. The song tells the story of teenage lovers of different social classes whose parents forbid their love. The song's protagonist is forced to break up with her girlfriend, and as a consequence, she commits suicide by drowning herself.
Floating face down in that dirty old river.
As the song ends, the protagonist is about to take the same plunge.
It may not be right, but I'll join you tonight.
The song was banned by a number of radio stations, but it sold over 1 million copies and was awarded a gold disc.
Hey Murray, is it true Betty's wearing your ring?
Mm-hmm. Who's that banging on the piano?
And that's when I fell in love with the leader of the laundromat.
And last but not least, this wouldn't be complete without one of the many parody songs that were released at the time. One of the very best was Leader of the Laundromat by the Detergents, a parody of Leader of the Pack by the Shangri-las. The protagonist falls in love with the leader of the laundromat, but her folks aren't too thrilled about that, and his parents force him to break up with her.
She grabbed my laundry and ran into the street, directly into the path of a runaway garbage truck. I yelled, "Watch out! Watch out! Watch out! Watch out!"
Dang it.
I hope you enjoyed this trip back to the early 60s when death discs were all the rage. See you next time.